Welcome to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. We love that you guys are able to watch the show because we always have a great time doing this, right?
Almost always, yeah.
Almost always. Anyways, Schlapp, I want to get to the news of the day because there's so much going on. But one thing really caught my eye. Believe it or not, they surveyed some voters that basically came up with these 10 responses of what they wanted Biden to do in the next year. So the top response was 20%. What do you think it was that they wanted Biden to do in the next year?
Wait till he gets to the bathroom.
That is not the answer. That was not part of the answers. But actually, fascinating enough, 20%, yes, that is right, a plurality of the voters said that Biden should resign, retire, or quit. Can you believe
What
that?
percentage?
20.
That low?
Well, I mean, it's the top one.
But you
really.
think about it, sweetheart. What happens if he retires?
Well, then you've got...
We get her.
Yeah, her.
So high, 20% is pretty high considering
Well,
the
I actually
backup
thought
plan.
it was fascinating because you're talking about 20% of the voters are actually saying, wait a second, it's time for him to go. And he's not even served out his first year of his presidency, which is absolutely insane. Would you be surprised with a number like that?
I wouldn't be happy if I was that person.
Which person, Kamala or Joe? Kamala.
No, if you're the
happy.
politician and 1/5 of the electorate is saying, hey, it's time for you to retire. And they don't ask why. Why do they want him to retire? Because he's not up to it, right?
He's
so
not
that's
up to the job.
That's pretty rough.
So I just am curious to see if the Democrats are quietly plotting to figure out who's going to take the helm. Because I don't think they even trust Kamala to take the helm.
Well, do you know who's after Kamala?
Buttigieg. That's who I think. Who do you think?
Well, the order of succession
Oh, no,
is
the order of succession would be Pelosi.
Pelosi,
Yes.
and she's not doing so well in the numbers either.
We're in big trouble.
So they've got an interesting array of talent at the top of their party.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons why I feel so buoyant about next year. I think we're going to do great.
Yeah, I mean, there was talk of, I think Newt Gingrich was at a speech at the Club 45, which we spoke to a couple months ago, saying he believed it would be, 60 seats that we would win, or between 40 and 60 seats? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when we picked up so many seats in 1994, which
Right.
was the Gingrich year, the revolution,
Right.
one of the reasons why we picked up so many seats is because we hadn't had the majority in 40
Forever,
years, 60
right.
years, some I think it was 40 years we hadn't had the majority. And so that was, since Eisenhower, that's why they had such a huge swing, whereas that majority is already pretty tight. So let me just tell you, if it is in the 40, 50, 60 seat range, it means that there's been a wholesale change of thinking across this country. That means a lot of people said, you know what, I actually like America. I actually think cops keep us safe. I actually think the military protects our whole country and protects our borders. School should be a place where you learn to write, do math, maybe not learn to hate your parents. And this idea that your kids should be told at 5 and 6 years old that they should consider changing their gender and taking drugs. So I just think they've gone so far. And you know what's weird, sweetheart? If you heard from the podium at the White House yesterday, everything was about equity. They won't stop. They did not hear the message from the election. Bill Clinton heard it. Barack Obama heard it.
Yeah.
These Biden people have not heard it.
You know, I think you're so right. I really think that they're very much blinded by their ideology. They're blinded by this agenda that they are tracking. And you have to wonder...
And they think Terry McAuliffe just blew it and ran a bad campaign, which he did. But that's not what Tuesday was about. Tuesday was about wins all over the country.
Right.
In a lot of blue broken cities.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting that you brought that up. I actually had dinner with some wonderful women a few days ago, and one of the moms told me that at her school, that the big issue for the 13-year-olds is all the transgender conversation, and that the girls really are wanting to have surgeries to remove their breast. I mean, it is that drastic, and the moms are just... they're beside themselves. They're like, before you had other issues, but this has taken a whole new, it's been taken to a whole new level.
These moms need to pull their kids out of those schools.
Right.
I know that's tough, but it's the only answer. We're not going to be able to make them stop fast enough.
And in the Arlington school district, actually within the documentation, the guidelines, if a child wants to change their pronoun, wants to be a different gender, quote unquote, the school has no obligation to tell the parents that the child is having these conversations at school. So it really becomes the school trying to dictate the terms of how to raise these children instead of the parents. And it's why you've seen this uprise, this movement of parents saying no more, taking control of their child's education, and sending a very strong message to the school boards and to these public school administrators.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a mom and dad revolution going on around this country, and I just think it's a great thing. I mean, how tragic it is what has happened to our kids, raising our kids to hate the country, propagandizing to them on radical politics, and sexualizing them at these ridiculously young ages.
You mentioned equity, which is something that the White House keeps talking about from everything.
Subtle shift. Used to always be equality, which
Okay.
means we're all the same. Now it's equity, which means they deserve to take all your money. Everything has to be the same, including everyone's savings balance.
Well, did you know the American Medical Association, they went woke. They provided a toolkit, some guidelines, and it's called, quote, Advancing Health Equity, a Guide to Language, Narrative, and Concept. Sounds like a really bad research paper, if you ask me. But part of this says, quote, narratives grounded in white supremacy and sustaining structural racism, for example, perpetuate cumulative disadvantage for some populations and cumulative advantage for white people, especially white men. Okay, Schlepp, you're a white guy. Sometimes you pretend you're Hispanic when you're dancing. But let me ask you, I mean, when you hear this, I mean, what's your first impression?
You should see Mercedes dance the polka. She is so good. But the look, my feeling is that
I don't know how to dance a polka.
you know,
Schlepp.
we read, it was a joke. I'm German, you're
okay.
Cuban.
Got it.
I don't dance salsa.
All right.
When you read J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy,
Yeah.
it was all about what's happened to these Appalachian families and white families who these people are saying are privileged to have every conceivable societal menace in their midst. And this idea that white America has it made, and that if you're a darker skin tone, that like you're the disadvantaged, nobody buys that anymore. Matter of fact, in America, anybody who makes good decisions can make it.
Right.
And we've come through a lot of these battles. And the thing is that's sad is that if we don't have any boys, but like young boys trying to get into elite colleges, white boys, straight white Christian boys, it's not happening. And the other thing is there's a little bit of a white freeze going on in terms of employment in a lot of these big companies. I have had friends call me from some of these big companies because they know how, you know, we've had to face some of this stuff. And they've said literally they were told by their diversity officer that they couldn't hire anyone who was white for a while.
Yeah.
It's almost like, you know, a cooling off period for white people. So, you know, that's because of this crap. And that's because there's this ideology that skin color matters more than anything else, and that the current white person has to make amends for what some white guy did a couple hundred years ago. That's just simply not consistent with the laws in America.
Well, and it's not consistent with the values of America
No.
either. As we've talked about so many times with Martin Luther King saying it's not about the color of your skin, but the content of your character.
Who would have thought, like, we need Martin Luther King. My God, I wish he could just come back and bring some sanity to these people, because the whole idea was give us a fair shot. Now it's like, you don't get a fair shot.
Yeah, and now it's all the CRT training happening across the board in so many of these corporations, which, you know, again, like people want to go to work, they want to make a living, they want to be able to get along with their colleagues. What we don't need is further division and being treated like, you know, there's all this separation with white privilege, the oppressed, the oppressor. That just is not advancing what we need to be doing here in America.
And what I'm amazed at the left, and once again, in kind of an objective way, my hat is off to them with how diabolically good they are. But while they were funding riots in our streets through Black Lives Matter Incorporated, they were funding curriculum changes through our schools for the last couple of years with CRT and other shapes and forms. All the same stuff. Teach the white kids to feel like they're bad. Teach kids to feel like there is no gender. All of these crazy ideas. And then, what do they do in the corporate boardroom, which was supposed to be the place that was a little more Republican friendly? They push ESG, and everything is equity, right?
Yeah.
So we got to stop using their words.
Right.
We got to start marching with these groups that hate America. We got to start we got to stop going along with all this. We should fight racism. We should not fight America.
And one other point here just to make is that it is the liberal media that's basically saying, no, CRT is not being taught in our schools. And then when you start digging deeper and you start to realize that, for example, in Virginia, one of the school districts paid $30,000 to do a CRT training for their teachers. Give me a break.
And as Larry O'Connor said, Why are they saying CRT isn't in the schools when on the next breath they say, well, there's nothing wrong with CRT.
That's right.
CRT is needed. So if they believe that, they will push it. Let me tell you, folks, anybody who could defend the burning of the cities and the killing of cops and the young victims of the violence, a lot of young kids of color, we saw that in our big cities during, more than a year ago in that Black Lives Matter summer. Anybody who could justify that level of violence. It's one thing to want to stand up for the death of George Floyd. It's quite another thing to say it was somehow good that cops feel like they're on the run and that cops are getting killed. What wouldn't you defend? And I think pushing a little propaganda in the schools, of course they're for that.
Right.
Putting a little illegal voting into the ballot boxes, of course they're for that. All of this is about power. It's all about power structures. And when I read the word narrative in anything, I think that is a Marxist term, and I'm not going to use it anymore.
Well, it's power and government control and their goal to take away your freedoms. But of course, we're going to be fighting back. The American people are waking up, and we are so excited that CPAC 2022 is happening in Florida, February 24th through the 27th. Schlapp, before we go to the best of CPAC, one of your favorite memories, I know we talked about this yesterday, but anything else that stands out to you in terms of CPAC and why it's such a special, special event?
We're trying to think about what the theme should be. I think we just figured out what it is. The American people awaken. That's a good theme, because that's what's happening in this country. It's not so much about Republican, Democrat. It's not so much about conservative, liberal. It's about this idea like we don't need Marxism and communism and socialism in our schools, in our churches, in our communities. We really don't need this. And I think that's what's happening across America. That's what the election was about. And I have a feeling that's what CPAC is going to be about. Let's have these community heroes, moms and dads, teachers and cops, Little League coaches and scout leaders. Let's have them tell us what they're going to do to save this country, because I think they're going to do it.
Well, it's we the people. It's what we're fighting for every day, and we're honored to be part of this fight with you. So you remember, you got to register. Go to conservative.org. You know this event sells out every single year. We will have the best speakers there. And now...
we already have a list of speakers to announce, so
Lord, that was
be
quick.
Watching.
It was like 24 hours ago.
People are saying yes fast. They want to be there.
I know. It's so fantastic, so exciting. And we have a lot of work to do, and we'll do that work together. And now I'll leave you with the best of CPAC.
The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, and the chairman of the American Conservative Union, Matt Schlapp.
It does a heart good, doesn't it, Governor?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, welcome to Florida. I know you probably wouldn't have been able to even do this in a lockdown state. I'm just glad I could attend CPAC, because if you did do it in a lockdown state, I have a policy I only travel to free states. So and I don't have any problem being in Florida.
We, as you all know, because many of you made the trip, we often have CPAC in another state, to be not named. That state decided to cancel us because they said this was unsafe. And I said to myself, I'll be damned if I'll be the first ACU chairman in 50 years to not have CPAC. And we looked around the country, Governor, and you have some competition. Tennessee, Texas, Georgia. We kind of moved away from Georgia, no offense. I'm sorry, Marcy. And we decided we'd come to Florida, and thank you for welcoming us with open arms.
Absolutely. 100%.
You know, Governor, some of your colleagues get Emmys for acting. We're happy to be in a state that has a governor who deserves the People's Choice Award.
Yeah, thanks.
I now give you Governor Ron DeSantis.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Well, thank you. We love you too. For those of you who aren't from Florida, welcome to our oasis of freedom. We are an oasis of freedom in a nation that's suffering in many parts of the country under the yoke of oppressive lockdowns. We look around in other parts of our country, and in far too many places, we see schools closed, businesses shuttered, and lives destroyed. And while so many governors over the last year had kept locking people down, Florida lifted people up. Florida is leading in protecting our vulnerable residents, saving the economy, and safeguarding the freedom of our people. In Florida, schools are open. Every Floridian has a right to earn a living, and all businesses have a right to operate. Now, we are stronger as a state and much happier as a people because of this leadership. Florida has lower per capita COVID mortality than the national average and lower than 27 other states. Our unemployment rate is lower than the national average, even though tourism isn't fully back. And our budget is in great shape. We have not touched one red cent from our rainy day fund throughout this whole time. Florida got it right, and the lockdown states got it wrong. Florida has also led and continues to lead on ensuring the integrity of our elections. Now, 20 years ago, if you had uttered the word Florida and the word elections in the same sentence, you would have been met with snickers. Well, when I came into office, I didn't wait for a crisis. I took early action to make sure we'd have a smooth election. One of the first things I did when I took office in 2019 was accept the resignation of Brenda Snipes as the supervisor of election in Broward County and remove the supervisor of election in Palm Beach County. We got those going in a good direction, and then when COVID hit, I rejected pressure to make hasty and ill-conceived changes to our election administration, like mass mailing of unsolicited ballots. And the result, on election night, by midnight, the state of Florida had counted, tabulated, and put out 11 million votes. But we're not resting on our laurels. This year, Florida is leading on banning all forms of ballot harvesting and banning third-party political groups like those funded by billionaire Mark Zuckerberg from interfering in the administration of our elections. Bottom line is this: in Florida, your vote counts, and we will continue to have a process that is transparent and that inspires confidence. Florida is also leading in protecting our people from political censorship and in holding big tech accountable. When our legislature convenes next month, it will pass and I will sign the most ambitious reforms yet proposed for combating political censorship and deplatforming, for preventing big tech from interfering in our elections, and for safeguarding the privacy of your personal data. In Florida, we are not going to let the terms of the debate in our country be set by oligarchs in Silicon Valley. Now, Florida is leading on the issues that matter to conservatives. We don't spout hollow rhetoric, we take decisive action. And what's true in Florida is true for conservatives across the nation. We cannot, we will not go back to the days of the failed Republican establishment of yesteryear. We reject open borders and instead support American sovereignty and the American worker. Building a movement on the foundation of amnesty and cheap foreign labor is like building a house on a field of quicksand. We reject weakness in the face of the threat posed by China, including their actions in international trade. We reject military adventurism, instead support a strong defense solely for the purpose of protecting our nation and its people. Now, the battles ahead will be made more difficult without the voice of one of our greatest field generals, my friend Rush Limbaugh. On Wednesday, the state of Florida had the flags flown at half-staff in honor of Rush, in honor of his legacy. Rush displayed the courage of his convictions time and time again. Rush was one of the first to fight and win against cancel culture. Rush showed that fighting the left requires strength and that conservatism devoid of backbone is doomed to fail. So at this moment in our history, and I think Rush showed us this, but particularly now, standing for the right things comes at a cost. You will be attacked, you will be smeared, and you may even be canceled by the major organs of the political left. Now, anyone can spout conservative rhetoric. We can sit around and have academic debates about conservative policy, and I'm not saying you don't do any of that, but the question is, when the Klieg lights get hot, when the left comes after you, will you stay strong or will you fold? So enjoy CPAC in Florida as you leave to go back home, although if you're not from here, I don't know why you'd want to leave here. But when you do and you engage in the battles ahead, hold the line, stand your ground, and don't ever, ever back down. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you.